If you were with us, you heard what I said about Dave Thompson earlier in the show. I just have a tremendous amount of respect for him. I didn't always like him saying, Joel, I need to talk to you when I was in the legislature, because quite frankly, I knew it was going to be some tough questions. He had an ear and still does to the ground. He knows what's going on in that capital, and that's the reason he's been with Prairie Public for as long as what he has. Let's bring him in and visit with him. Dave, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Hey, thank you, Joel. My pleasure.
All right. You've been through how many special sessions? You probably didn't expect to be asked that, but special sessions are a whole different thing to cover than others. They have to be interesting versus the mundane everyday of the legislature.
Right. And a lot of special sessions have to deal with redistricting. So let's start with 81, 91, 01, 2011. Now it's going to be the fifth special session. Plus, there was a special session, if you remember, when they had the money for the corn plant at Wampatuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. I wasn't there for that, but I was one of the ones that was pushing to beat heck for it to make sure that we could get it, because It was down in my neck of the woods. That was an Ed Schaefer event, if I remember right.
That's
Dave.
right. It was, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk a little bit about this special session because it's unique in the sense that there's a pot of money sitting there, and money that has to get out, and it came from the federal government. It isn't coming from the state of North Dakota, but they're going to have to administer it. They're going to have to appropriate it. How big of a factor is that going to play in this special session?
I think it really actually overshadows what's going to happen with redistricting, with the one issue of the sub-districts that could be very contentious. But I mean, spending that money, there are still some people in one house, for example, who think that they shouldn't spend anything. And in the other house, they virtually wanted to spend all of it, get it out and get it to work. And Governor Burgum was talking about spending that, but he also suggested something that is almost anathema to legislators, and that is diving into the ending fund balance and spending some of that money too. So there's a lot of things at play in this session, I think.
When I heard that, Dave, I thought about, when he was talking about diving into the ending fund balance, I thought, Doug Burgum is probably the least popular governor with the legislature that there has been in my time following North Dakota government. When he starts investing money in making sure certain legislators get beat, that sends up a huge red flag. And then one of the ones he's after ends up being chairman of the House Appropriations. That's another big problem. And so here's part of my theory, and I'm sure you're not going to agree with it, but if he goes out and pushes for more and more and more than he knows he's going to get, diving into the leftover money, the money that came in that we didn't appropriate, maybe he's just trying to get to the point where instead of debating moving this federal dollars, he knows they're going to, because if they just move that money instead of the ending fund balance, the extra there, then they can say, whoa, we showed that governor who's really in charge. And I wonder if some of that talk is going around the hallways.
I've actually heard some of that talk in the hallways, and I think there might be some validity to it. I think that'll be interesting to watch this whole thing roll out, because talking to people in both appropriations committees who've been meeting over the last 3 weeks to try to get bills together, there is absolutely no appetite to spend that ending fund balance. They've got some commitments already for the next biennium that they're talking about. But you mentioned that Governor Doug Burgum may be the most disliked among legislators. It used to be Ed Schaefer, because remember, Ed Schaefer came to that first legislative session, and it was kind of like this between the legislature and Ed. And remember, were you in that session when he said he wanted them to leave town with $10 million in the bank? Mm-hmm. They left town with $5 million in the bank, and he held a press conferences. Okay, I'll accept $5 million. It's good to get them out of town.
I remember.
So, there was a little
I was there.
I mean, it was fun times for me as a reporter, as an observer, but I'm sure there were some angst moments among legislators. Let's put it that way.
Just to put it in perspective for all our viewers out there, an ending fund balance of around 13. I think we talked about 13 when we pulled the pin and left town. But the governor, it was about as tight as it could be. And of course, Ed Schaefer was known as a very big cutter. He didn't just say, I want a 95% budget. He was going to appropriate based upon a 95% budget or less. But the difference between Ed Schaefer and Doug Burgum is Ed Schaefer didn't care if they liked him. Doug Burgum seems to do everything he can to want them to like him. And that's a big difference. That's a really big difference. Ed saw the separation of powers, and he thought, in the purest sense of government, that he really didn't care. And so he and John Dorso and Gary Nelson were locking horns every other day. And of course, that was bound to happen. And so when it comes to this appropriation, when it comes to this money, I'm wondering if the best thing that the governor couldn't do is just stay away.
I think you're probably right, but I don't think he wants to stay away because he wants to put his stamp on this. Now, that's the other discussion that's going on, Joel. I'm sure you've heard it too. Is the governor going to actually call them back for a special session, or is the legislature going to use the 4 days they saved?
Yeah.
If the legislature uses the 4 days they saved, well, the governor doesn't have any right to talk to them. But there's some feeling that if the governor calls him back, he'll want to demand a State of the State address to lay out his budget priorities.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. In the little bit of time that we have left, it appears that the redistricting committee is trying to get, you've got supermajorities and you've got Republicans trying to get rid of Republicans. They're eliminating my own district because they don't want Jason Heitkamp and Sebastian Ertelt and Kathy Scraw to be legislators anymore. That's a huge fight that's going on, Dave. That's a huge fight that's going on out there, and you must have picked up on that.
Oh yes, have that, and I've seen some of the alternatives to what the committee came up with, and the one that was extremely interesting would have had a district that ran along the Red River from Davies High School in Fargo to Wahpeton.
Yeah,
to save somebody.
Yeah.
in the Bastiat caucus. I think there's also going to be that fight over the sub-districts.
No,
because the proposal for 2 sub-districts, there isn't a lot of support for that in the House, and the House may try to remove that.
Yeah, I long-time support I've gotten from the tribes, but I have to tell you, I don't like the sub-districts. I don't, and I'm not sure it stands up to the rule of law either. And of course, there's only some tribes that win when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. Dave, when it comes to the special session, can we call on you some more and get some more updates?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Dave,
I'm going to be there. I love it. I love the process.
I know you'll be there. Trust me. And you should get hazard pay for it.